My foster parents, they thought they could not have a child by birth, so they adopted me. But then they found out, oh, well, they can have a baby by birth because my mom gets pregnant. And then they just kind of forget about me and toss me to the side. But now they're coming back years later, trying to rekindle the relationship, and you will not believe why.
Can you forgive someone you love, even if they did something unforgivable to you? I'm asking because that's the problem I've been dealing with for a few weeks. The ghosts of my past have returned, and I have no idea how to deal with them. Now, I'm not talking about anything bad I did in the past per se, but I'm talking about some people who have wronged me. Let me explain from the start so that this makes sense. I'm 33, I live with my girlfriend, and I'm a lawyer by profession. After going through a really traumatic past, I believed that I suffered enough. But life had other plans, see. The same parents who threw me out like I was trash are now trying their best to reconnect with me, and I don't know what to do. I don't know who my real parents are because I was adopted from a foster home when I was 3. Honestly, I don't mind this part because I was too young to realize that I was originally an orphan and grew up thinking the parents who adopted me were my real parents. So my father, Alex, and mom, Miley, adopted me when they were in their 20s because they were not able to conceive by themselves. My parents believed that they would never be able to have children, so they chose to adopt, and we were very happy with me for a few years. They raised me well and took care of everything I needed, but I would sometimes feel like they wanted something else from me. See, when I was like 7 or 8, they told me that I was adopted. They made me think that maybe they wanted a biological child and were probably disappointed that they had me. I can't surely say that they regretted having me at first, but it was pretty clear that they wanted a child of their own too. Because even as they raised me, they were trying their best to have their child and would be disappointed when they couldn't. When I was 10, they gave up trying to have a kid because they probably believed they could not, but being fully honest, even though I could not understand about what's really going on, it still hurt me to know I could not make my parents happy. Also, if they had just treated me as their own child, they would not even have a problem because I always treated them as my own parents. Throughout my childhood, I knew that they always wanted a child of their own, and I prayed that they would get it somehow. I also wanted a brother or a sister, and I knew this would make them very happy too. A few years later, my wish came true, but I had no idea how much of a curse that blessing was going to bring. Just to make it clear, my parents never directly told me that they did not want me or make me feel hated or anything, but it was clear that I was more of a second opinion. The next option. And they would simply much rather have a biological child than me, even after years of raising me to be their own. When I was 11, a miracle happened, so they say. My mother got pregnant unexpectedly. All of our wishes had come true, and it made my parents happier than I've ever imagined. Several months ago, we welcomed a healthy son into the family. My parents named him Marshall. It was after this that everything in my life started going wrong, and I regretted ever praying for a brother. So after my parents had Marshall, they pretty much stopped looking after me. It was like they did not care about me at all. Essentially, they lost all interest in me and only cared about my brother. I was not jealous. I had already prepared a situation for this. But I was still expecting them to do a bit better. But I knew that, well, I could learn to live with it. It was better than being an orphan, I'll tell you that right now. But then something happened that made me wish I've never been adopted to them at all, really. When Marshall was just 2 years of age, I was 13 and my parents sat me down to tell me something that I simply could not believe. One day, my father asked me to sit down, told me they have some bad news, and apologized for what he was about to do. I couldn't understand, or really, I just asked him to explain. He looked sad, he did, and told me that he and Mom were sending me back to the foster home, asking me to forgive them. I couldn't even understand what he just said because I did not even know if it was possible to send somebody back like that. I refused to believe him and started calling for my mom. She came in, she looked even sadder than Dad, but now I know that it was probably just fake. She then said that they did not have enough to raise both me and Marshall, and were being forced to choose. Well, unfortunately for me, they were going with him. I now know that they had enough to raise both of us, but they just wanted to give Marshall a life of luxury. I cried, I begged them to keep me, and told them that I would do anything. I told them I would never disobey them and would work even harder in school, even though I was great at studying and had never disobeyed them. Ever since I realized that I was adopted, I've never acted ungrateful and have always been on my best behavior. So it made sense to me as to why they were doing this. No logic at all. That day, they tried their best to make me happy by making my favorite things, but I did not really think that it would matter to me. I stayed in my room and refused to go anywhere with them, and I could not stop crying. But no matter how much I cried that day, they dragged me back to the same place, the same fort, after 10 years of taking me away from there. It felt like they just returned me for being a bad product on a warranty. It was a traumatic experience, and the effect it had on my mental health was disastrous. Also, it did not help that I blame myself for everything, and it took years to properly deal with everything I experienced. Anyways, after my parents left me, I kept believing that they would come back, but after months of waiting, I had to give up. I then had to forget the fact that I had a family for 10 years, and then readjust to being an orphan. My life really felt like a badly written TV show, something that would not even get picked up on air. I'll be completely honest with you guys, life was very hard after that, and every day I wished that somebody else would have adopted me instead of them. It took me almost a year just to get motivated enough to start studying hard and focus on building my own life instead of my deadbeat parents. So, I decided to let them and their trauma go and work hard to become happy and successful. After years of hard work and scholarships, I managed to get into a good school, a law school, as I had started dreaming of being a lawyer. And after working harder for several years, I became a pretty dang good one, I'll say. I forgot to add, but I met Julie while I was in law school, and we started dating during our last year. We've been together since then. So, now that you know everything I've done and gone through, you can understand the shock when I got a call from Alex, my ex-father as I call him, just a few weeks ago. Almost 3 weeks to this day. As I returned from work, I get that call, and I assumed it was from a client. I was a bit surprised at first because clients come to me mostly through my assistant, and only a few call me directly, getting my number from other clients. Well, imagine my shock when I picked up my phone thinking it was a client and my father started asking for me. I was so surprised that I froze for a second and cut the call without speaking. I don't know if you can understand, but hearing his voice brought out way too much trauma that I don't want to handle. But he kept calling and trying to speak to me, even after I kept avoiding both his calls and text messages. He said that he missed me and wanted me to give him one chance to explain everything. After about a week, my mom also joined in and is trying her best to talk to me. They have even showed up at my office, but I've asked my assistant not to let them in, as I don't really want to see their faces. The problem here is that they're not quitting, and they're going to keep trying until I hear them out for once, but guys, I simply do not want to. It's been, 20 years, 2 decades, since they left me at that foster home. But I've not forgotten any of it. I don't want to help them, and I don't care about them at all. But they seem to think that they've done me some kind of favor that I should pay back, but all they did was make my life hard. My girlfriend's telling me that I should give them a chance, since ignoring them is not doing me any good. She thinks that hearing them out makes me a better person than them, but I don't care. I want you guys to tell me, am I doing this wrong by not even giving my ex-parents a chance, or is it justified for everything that they did to me? Update number 1. Hey guys, it's almost been 2 weeks and I never expected to get this many suggestions and support. So let me start by thanking you guys for it. See, I noticed that many people understood my position and suggested that I stay away from my parents. Some told me that running from it was only going to make things worse. You guys were as conflicted as me, and honestly it made a lot of sense why I was having a hard time choosing. Well, for better or for worse, actually ended up making a decision. Let me continue from where I left off. So, a few days after I wrote, my assistant told me that my parents had showed up again, and they were coming non-stop at my office. She wanted me to do something about it, handle it, and honestly, I simply wanted them to leave me alone. But since they were refusing to understand, I knew I had to at least do something to get them off my back. After thinking about it for a while, I decided that calling them was probably the best thing for me at the moment. So I called them and genuinely told them that I had no interest in what they wanted to say, and that I didn't want them around in my life. I asked them to stop coming to my office and stop bothering me. Alex said that he and Miley were both very sorry for everything that happened, and they tried their best to convince me to meet with them. But I refused, and told them I did not want to hear another word about their problems and their wants. I want them out of my life. I warned them that if they kept troubling me, then I would not hesitate to involve the authorities. With that, I cut the call, blocked the number, and hoped that they would leave me alone. For a few days, I thought it worked because they stopped showing up to the office. But as soon as I learned that they just shifted their target to a different direction, they somehow got my address, probably from a previous client, and showed up at my house. Although I was out meeting a client, my girlfriend was there and she let them in. They then proceeded to tell her that my brother, their son, was in trouble, and that was the reason they were trying to see me. Although it made me mad that they showed up at the house like that, but I still appreciated that they did not annoy my girlfriend and left almost immediately. They just asked her to try and convince me to hear them out, as that was all they wanted from the get-go. They also promised that they would not keep showing up to the house and only did this to convey their message. As you can probably imagine, my girlfriend, being the kind person that she is, thinks that I should give them a chance. She says that they're worried about their child, and, well, that's why they've been trying so hard to get my help, and that no matter what they did to me, it was not their son's fault. Marshall being in trouble makes me suspicious, because I still think that they just want me to help them financially somehow. But now I have to know, and I can't just sit around ignoring them. I feel like that was probably the reason they showed up at my house in the first place. They knew that after they did this, I would have to see them and would not be able to keep trying to cut them off, so I decided to give up and just see them and listen to their problems once and for all. If Marshall is actually in trouble and I can help, then I will. But I still don't want to have any contact with him. Let's see what happens. Update number 2. Hey guys, it's been a week since my last update, and I finally have the entire context of why my parents needed my help in the first place. A few days after my last update, I met them at a local cafe near my office. They were very, very happy with my decision. As I sat down, they told me how happy I've made them and how proud they were of what I've achieved. I told them I didn't care even the littlest bit about what they thought of me. And it's been a long time since I've thought about them, to be honest. Well, so it would be good if they stopped trying to make small talk. They looked hurt by the statement, but I didn't care enough about them to stop. I told them that we both know that they clearly had never liked me and were only here for a problem that they thought I could help with. They tried to debate this and told me that they had no option but to send me back, and doing so hurt them more than I could ever imagine. They also said that they regretted their decision every single day and was wishing that they could have kept me. Since they wanted to play this game, okay, I joined in and asked them why they never tried to contact me after they left me there then. I understood that they could not take me back, but they could have at least tried to check up on me once, twice, thrice a year. My father was taken back, but only for a few seconds was he surprised, as he immediately pulled a response right there out of thin air. He said that he had contacted the person who took care of us many times to check up on how I was doing. He'd never directly contacted me because he believed that I truly hated them and didn't want to hear them say anything. Well, all of this was obviously a lie. But I let it go because calling them out for this was only going to make the conversation longer. So, I told them that I still felt the same way I did back in foster care about them, and I asked them to come to the point. Then they told me that the problem was this. They said that Marshall was in a bit of a legal trouble and wanted me to get him out of it. They had found out about me from one of my popular cases and believed that I was probably the best person to help them fight the case. The story they gave me was this. Marshall caught his girlfriend Lily with a guy in their house, and when he tried to leave with his stuff, she stopped him. She tried. So he pushed her out of the way, went and broke up with her, and he was supporting her financially so she could not even pay rent and had to move out. Lily tried to get him back, of course, on several occasions, but when she realized that he had gotten rid of her for good, she filed a case. Before the case, she asked Marshall to give her a good amount of money to pay her back, but he refused. So she went through with it. She accuses him of assault and faking the proof to make it look like Marshall was guilty. Because of her proof, the fake testimony, Marshall ended up in police custody, believe it or not, and they wanted me to get him out somehow. They said that they understood how I felt and they did not have the right to even show their faces, but they still showed up because they wanted me to help their son. At this point, I couldn't really blame them for showing up. Since this seemed like a genuine reason, I told them that I wanted a little bit of time before I could tell them what my decision was, and they happily agreed. I asked for some time because I don't truly believe. I just want to do some research on what's actually happening before I decide to take the case, obviously. So I'm going to do some research on this, and I'll let you guys know what I decide to do. Update number 3. This is the final update of the story. Hey guys. Well, it's been a few weeks, and I apologize for the last update. Well, it's been a while, I know. I completed my research, and guess what I found? Spoiler alert, my parents haven't changed one bit, and they're liars. Manipulating still, and they've always been like this. I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking the same thing just a few weeks ago. I thought that they were lying about Marshall being in trouble, but they were actually telling the good old truth. But they were not being completely honest about it, and they were, what do they call, twisting my wrist? Let me explain more clearly. So, after my last update, I discussed it with Julie, and she told me that it was a good idea to do some research first, of course. Knowing my parents, I could not take any chance. So, as I was doing said research, I found out that one of the cops involved in this case was someone Julie had contact with. So, with her help, I spoke to the guy, who told me what actually happened. It turns out Marshall had come home to find his girlfriend, Lily, doing some work with her friend and co-worker. They had a project they needed to complete and had decided to do it at her place. Since the decision had been taken in a rush, she had forgotten to let Marshall know about this, and when he returned, he accused her of being a cheater. He then, in front of the other guy, beat her up, at which point the guy had to push him and take her out to save her life. She broke up with him, of course. He stole all her saved money from the safe and refused to give it back. At this point, she was forced to file a case against him, obviously, and it did not go in his favor. Once again, obviously. I could not just believe his words, so I checked all the evidence and even spoke with a few people, including the guy who was there, and when all of this went down. This led to the conclusion that Marshall was actually guilty, and that he had grown up to be a terrible, terrible person. Just to make sure that I was covering all my bases, I spoke with Lily herself. She told me how badly Marshall treated her. She went on to tell me that he was the worst person she had ever been with, ever, and even told his parents many times about his abusive behavior, but they refused to do a thing about it. He was very jealous all the time and lived mostly on her money, but he still acted like he owned everything. Her dam of patience broke when he laid his hands on her that day, and the money thing, which led to her filing the case, come on. Hearing all this made me so mad at him and the parents that I gave Lily a few tips on what she could do to make it worse for old Marshall. Okay. I gathered evidence. I had it all, and I called Alex and Millie to my office. They showed up delighted that I was going to accept their offer to help Marshall, but their expression changed drastically as they realized the truth. I told them that I did not appreciate being manipulated, and I hated the fact that they had turned their son into a person like them. I said that, forget taking their case or a guilty person like him, I'd actually collected more incriminating evidence against him. And if they even tried to bother me or anyone I know about me helping them, then I'm going to submit these to the court myself to make whatever sentence Marshall gets just a tad bit longer. It's fair to say that they got pretty scared by this, apologized, and even cleaned my shoes. Just kidding, but they promised to never show their faces again. But they also begged me one last time to reconsider and help my brother. I told them that I was an orphan and had no brother. After that, they left and have left me unbothered for over 2 weeks apiece, which I guess means they quit. As for Marshall, it's really not looking good for him, and honestly, he deserves it for hitting his girl like that. And as for me, I'm very happy that my ex-parents have stopped bothering me, and I'm slowly settling back into my normal day-to-day life. Hopefully, I won't have to go through something like that ever again, and I hope you don't